Hello, I'm John Green. I'm running for the Central Ward, and I've had experience at City Hall since 1995, my work, and I've been a volunteer there for about 15 years. And my whole campaign is based on long-term planning. And I'm fully supportive of fixing the roads, I'm fully supportive of spinning off the utilities, but I'm for long-range planning to bring our financial situation under control. Having said that, if I'm elected, I'd like to open discussion immediately with the union, with a view to reducing salaries of about 25% over the next 4 years. Our current average salary at City Hall is about $111,000, and it's simply not sustainable in these economic times. Secondly, I'd like to open discussion with the Kitsap County Board of Supervisors with a view for them to take over some of our public work responsibilities. Similarly with Kitsap County Law Enforcement, so that the law enforcement can come in and assist us making Bainbridge Island a sub-station. I've looked at all the budget reports, I've looked at the economy going forward, and I've done my homework, and I don't think that Bainbridge Island, given our falling tax base, can afford to go forward over the next 4 years without substantial economic cost cutting. Thank you.
Chris. I'm Chris Van Dyke. I've been involved actively in politics and community affairs since 1968 when I worked on actually Richard Nixon's campaign as the Spokane County Youth Coordinator. 4 years later, I worked on George McGovern's campaign as the Sarasota County Youth Coordinator as a college student. So since that time, I've managed corporations, managed large businesses. I am currently a public affairs, political relations consultant. I work in Olympia. I have spent, as a lobbyist, I've spent the last 4 years doing what I think I do best, which is solving intractable, nearly intractable problems. We had one problem down there where that I worked on, where we got 10,000 for-hire vehicle operators into the industrial insurance system in Washington State, had been opposed by industry for years. We got that done at no cost to the state. On Bainbridge Island, I want to bring that experience, the political experience, to bear in making Bainbridge Island a better place. That's my only reason for running. I don't have an axe to grind or an ideology. I would not want to whack payrolls by 25% or any unilateral approach. I want to get people working together, looking at the facts, looking at what we have to do, and just simply make Bainbridge Island a better place to live.
Joe. Hello, I'm Joe Levan, also running for the Central Ward. It's a couple of main reasons that I'm running. One is that I think that our island is a particularly special place, a very unique place. And I think in terms of natural resources and the amount of talented people who live on the island, it's an incredible place to live. And I'd like to be a part of trying to maintain that and even foster to make it better. I've got a 7-year-old daughter, and I think about her. I think about her generation. I think about the future, and it's not going to. Yeah, it's not going to stay unique and special unless it's a lot of hard work happens in the meantime. The second main reason is I've got, I think, a really unique set of skills and experience. I'm a municipal attorney. I currently work for an organization. Every day I deal with questions, legal questions with city governments and other local governments and help them solve problems. I also deal with other types of local governments in terms of a broader perspective. So it's not just about trying to deal with legal issues, but it's a matter of trying to come up with solutions. And I have some real world experience with those solutions. And I think that I could be a real contributor to the council in terms of my experience and my knowledge. I'm also, I've got a calm temperament. I'm a reasonable person. I like to listen to people, hear what they have to say. And I think the council, to be effective, needs to be a body that listens well to the citizens and makes informed decisions. And I think we need people on the council that can work well together, take tough votes when necessary, but work as a team. And also, one thing I've heard quite a bit in the community is that there's a sense about people coming in, and especially coming into City Hall, for example, and feeling like the city doesn't work for them. And I'd like to change that culture as best I can, so that when people come in, part of the main reason that the council exists is to try to establish clear policies and regulations. And if they're not clear, they should be clarified. That's what the council's role is, so that the staff that's trying to interpret those regulations, it makes their job a lot easier, and also is a situation where hopefully you can get staff that can work with people that when they come in and they have projects or whatever else. In terms of some of the specifics, I really want to focus on, especially in the Central Ward. I think the utility issue is a big issue. The rates are too high; they need to come down, and I want to be a part of that. I don't necessarily think the best idea is to get rid of the utility, but I'm open to talk about different solutions.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm David Ward, and I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I've lived in the island for the last 20 years with my family. I've possessed master's degrees in botany and have an MBA, which seems like a weird combination, but it's served me well over the years. I've got 25 years of experience in the mapping industry in operations, management, and sales. I'm currently working on some carbon measurement projects in Indonesia, which is kind of an interesting thing. But you know, my background and my experience has made me used to looking at systems rather than parts and pieces of things, understanding how they work together, and be it an ecosystem or a water system, and that's been very helpful to me. Why am I running? I've spent the last 2 years on the Utility Advisory Committee, and I'm currently the chairman that we advise the City Council on utilities, and I've seen up close and personal the major problem with the city's utilities, and much of it relates to excessive overhead costs and high rates when you compare it to other utilities. Our water utility has the highest rates in the region and is just sitting there accumulating cash to the tune of $4.8 million now. We need to immediately transfer it to the KPUD. It's a well-respected organization, and the ratepayers will be much better served. We can manage water as a regional resource rather than a local resource. Makes a lot of sense. The road fund gets $2.8 million a year, and they're gonna fix a whopping 4 miles of road this year. That's 2.8% of the island's roads. That'll take us 35 years to go through all the roads on the island at that rate, and that's just absolutely ridiculous. So we need to spend more of that $2.8 million on maintenance. I've been chairman of our neighborhood council for the last 2 years, and we've been involved in a protracted struggle with a developer that's trying to put a major inappropriate development right next to our neighborhood. And we've had to go to the extent of hiring a land use attorney, and fortunately we've won the last 2 rounds with the hearing examiner. But the current process with the city creates a huge amount of conflict. Neighborhoods need to be involved in that conflict from the very beginning and make it a collaborative process. Right now, it just leads to conflict. Finally, I realize I'm one of 7 people on a council. No one person can do it alone. It's important to build rapport with the other members and have a collegial atmosphere. My business experience has taught me the value of learning to cooperate and communicate with diverse groups of people to seek a solution. So, thank you.
I'm going to pick up on an issue that three of you guys mentioned it, and we spent some time with it with the other group, and that's the utility issue with the water utility, and also we touched on a little bit with the others. If the water utility was to move, what would become the sewer utility? Whether that's something that should also be looked at, whether that's something that how would that operate without the water utility along with it, since there's some overlap between the 2 departments right now. So what I'm really asking is your opinion on what the city should do with those, whether it's better to retain those, that water utility or to move it to the county or to the Kitsap PUD rather. I'll let Chris begin and we'll go this way.
I expense what's driving the difficulty with it. I am a ratepayer, water user, I'm also a taxpayer. And if on balance, the net gain from spinning off the utility, the Kitsap Public Utility District were just solely benefit me as a ratepayer, but on the other hand, driving the taxes up, that wouldn't be a good thing. And then also, there's a tendency on the island. Island formed its city government, what, 20 years ago or so, and there's a movement that says, gee, as an island, you know, we can't do it. We can't run a water utility. We can't run a city. We can't run a police department. We buy our power from Puget Power, and I don't want to see us put in the position of not running our own show and losing that independence. Granted, there may be problems with how it's run now, but it's incumbent on us to fix them. I don't think just kicking football over the other football field is necessarily a good solution. I wouldn't want to be in the position of having sold off a utility, and 10 years from now, having others question and say, gee, why did you do this? You had the opportunity to fix it. You had the opportunity to use it. There is also an issue, as I understand it, and I'm not an expert on it, I haven't studied it in great detail, but there's an issue with, that's how we pay for our sewer. How do we separate that? How do we have a separate utility? And all I'm going to say is that as a council member, as one who has examined technical issues from a management point of view thoroughly, I wouldn't prejudge the decision in any way, shape, or form.
On most things, I think about, as I mentioned before, the future. And I think what's going on here is we incorporated as a city for a reason. I think it was a good idea to incorporate as a city, to expand that city from a town of Winslow to an entire island. I think one of the things that you do when you become a city is to the extent you can, you run the essential public services. And obviously the water utility is an essential public service. So I think it would be a last resort to sell that off or to have that go away to some other organization. It seems to me the biggest argument here is the one about cost. It's going to save 45% or something to have KPUD take it over. But it's my understanding that the city itself can, through its own utility, save 35 to 45%. There's been a report done, and it hasn't been finalized yet, that's looking into this. And if that's the argument, and it's just about saving costs, it looks to me like the costs are going to be pretty comparable. The city itself, by maintaining its utility, can reach comparable rates and savings. And so if you think down the road, I just don't think it's a good idea to give up an essential public facility. I also think there are I know that there are some savings that occur through having multiple utilities, sewer and the stormwater as well. To the extent you have different customer service representatives within the city that are cross-trained to handle the different utilities, there's cost savings there. And there's an impact. If you get rid of the water utility, how does it affect the sewer utility? It's my understanding that there's nobody that wants the sewer utility, so that's going to cost extra money. What do we do about our stormwater? In my mind, again, we're a city for a reason. We should take on the responsibility of handling our own public or essential facilities. This is an essential facility. If there's some other arguments or some other good data that comes out through these reports, then I definitely want to look carefully at that. But at this point, I'm not convinced that it is a good idea to sell it off to KPUD.
My thinking on this is driven by my feeling that it's a fundamental responsibility of the city to do an efficient job of delivering services to its ratepayers. If you start at that point and then start to look at these things, I think it begins to make more sense. I spent about an hour and a half with Bob Hunter, the general manager of KPUD, yesterday discussing the water utility and their move towards getting into the sewer business, and they are taking steps in that direction. Something to keep in mind is there's a compelling reason, a cost reason, to look at setting the water utility to the KPUD. There's huge economies of scale in operating multiple water systems together. You don't do that with a sewer system. You don't gain anything by hooking 6 sewer systems together. It doesn't happen. So you can efficiently run a sewer system as a standalone entity and do a good job of that. Water is very different. Right now the city's using as an excuse the fact that, gosh, if we got rid of the water system, we'd have all these people that are charging time to both utilities. I think some of them are cross-trained, but I'm convinced a number of them are just charging time to both utilities as a way of covering their hours. When we first started looking at the water utility, for example, there were no less than 73 people charging time to the water utility, including the harbor master. The only thing I could figure out she did was change the code on the shower door in the waterfront park, which is kind of remotely related to water. They've changed that a little bit, but there's still a lot of abuses going on in that area. So I still strongly support moving the water utility to the KPUD and then attacking the economies of the sewer system, and maybe ultimately having KPUD manage that as well.
I agree with what Dave's saying, 100%. I want to take it just a little bit further. He's absolutely right on the water utility, where its employees do charge their salaries against it. And one of the reasons why they do that is because our salary scale is higher by 25% than the private sector. And one of the reasons I said that I'd like to talk to the unions about reducing that salary by 25% over the next 4 years is because we cannot pay those bills. You know, we're dragging our anchor along the bottom now, and we're going to hit the rocks very, very soon financially. One of the reasons on top of that is that the admin costs for last year were $18 million, 30% of our budget. And 30% of our budget were
For the water utility alone?
No, this was our administration costs. And so they have to charge those additional costs. They have to spread them out wherever they can get. The sewer, the utility, and various other ones through operations and maintenance.
Okay. The $18 million was
$18 million.
Water utility alone?
No, that was admin costs, administration costs last year, at 30% of our budget. Well, the outside private world runs at about 15 to 18% of their budget. So we have to reduce our costs. We have to reduce our costs at the City Hall somehow. Getting rid of the water utility will actually lower the water rates for the citizens using that by about 50%. That's a substantial saving. And when you look at that and you look at how the money's been spent by keeping the salaries up, it's leveraged to the salaries, directly to the salaries. Anybody that touches that water utility is entitled, and Dave's absolutely right. I didn't know about the shower code, but he's absolutely right. And that's what's happening. It's where can we get the money? What part of the community can we get our money to cover our salaries? And what's happened now is the citizens work for the government on Bainbridge Island.
This is kind of leading to the next question, kind of what John is talking about. If you were elected and began down the path of cutting salaries or negotiating salaries.
I want to negotiate them.
Yeah, that would play into a. I would imagine there's already somewhat of a morale issue with some of the job cuts that have been over the years with some city staff, and then there was also mentioned that when people go in, it's not always the greatest relationship that a citizen feels. And so I'm curious, understanding that a city council person does not manage staff actively, but you do guide some policy, and it is kind of your responsibility to respond to taxpayers. How would you address the issue of city staff morale, that city hall attitude, to get the employees to still do their best to do those things? We're going to start with Joe here.
Well, I think Bainbridge is somewhat unique in this respect for the size of the city, at least in my experience in dealing with other cities. Because you have a situation where you have two unions. You have a police guild and a separate union for other employees. And most all of the other employees are unionized. So you have a situation in terms of compensation where you have negotiations to go on with these unions to determine what's fair and reasonable, and the workers themselves have rights that they collectively bargain, which is, I think, an important right, and it's not the problem, but it makes it more complex. You also have civil service involved, which makes it a little more complex as well. But I think the overall answer to your question is it's a matter of the staff getting an environment where the staff feels like they're supported. And I think it's a matter of a lot of people, their contact with the city, some people almost entirely is just the line people that they meet when they come into City Hall. So if I were part of the council, that'd be one of the things, what the council's role, one of the main roles they do in a city manager forum is they hire the city manager that administers the city. And the person you have the city manager is an incredibly important position because they're the one who has that authority over the staff. And there needs to be an environment where you have very competent people that are the face of the city to the people that come in and deal with the city on a day-to-day basis. And those people need to be supported, and they need to be well-trained. And again, there needs to be clarity in terms of the regulations and otherwise, so they understand what's there. I also think as a council, there are times when you have close votes. You have a 4-3 vote. But it doesn't help any if you have people that are on the losing side of that vote that go and try to raise a bunch of issues and where the city's not on the same page, especially to the extent that you have staff members that are trying to, are in that same mindset. I mean, we need to be part of a team and work together and be on the same page as a city.
The main responsibility of the city council is fiduciary. They set the budget. It really comes down to that. And I empathize with the city employees. They've had the specter of change hovering over them for the past 2 years. It's become very apparent that the city is near broke. They can't maintain their current level of employment and services. And so that has a really devastating morale impact on the morale impact on the employees. I think that the changes need to be made. They need to be made swiftly and with sensitivity, and then get on with the restructured city staff. Let people know that we're now going to operate with a stable workforce for the foreseeable future, and do the necessary things to give them reassurance that their job's going to be around tomorrow, and they can get on with it and start thinking about the whole function of the city in the long term, rather than, will I get fired tomorrow? I've been in that situation myself, and it's not pleasant, and you're absolutely right, it's demoralizing.
Well, staff morale has been pretty bad for a long time, and I'm not saying that I want to lay off people. That's not the case at all. What I'm saying is I want to reduce the salaries and keep the staff. We have some really good, skilled people at that City Hall, and we need them. Laying them off doesn't help the solution at all. I want to talk to them about reducing the compensation package down over 4 years, 25%. That'll bring us into line with our revenue that's going to be dropping in the next 4 years from our property taxes. You see, I'm trying to balance them out, because our budget, it's revenue-based, it's not spending-based. So our revenue comes in from property taxes primarily, from real estate development primarily, which is off 80%, so we're not getting anything from that. And our tax base, being the property taxes, well, they're dropping. And they've dropped, property values have dropped on the island. I'm in the real estate business, have dropped about 30%. So that's going to catch us up on our revenue coming into City Hall, into our general fund. Now, we can't have salaries up here, fixed cost up here, and revenue sliding down like this. You can't do it. After a while, it's a complete negative. We're running about neck and neck right now. Drop it this way, and we're running in the millions in the negative. And that's why we're always in this situation, or have been for the last 3 or 4 years. At the end of the year, we haven't got anything left in our general fund. I mean, it's allocated funds, and we show allocated funds, but they're all encumbered. So what I'm trying to say here is we have to do a little bit of everything. We have to reduce our overhead and compensation. We have to go out to Kitsap County, to the commissioners out there, and ask them if they'll come in, work with us on our public works, because we can't afford to run that. And spin off the water utility, and look at the legal aspects, the police force. We have 22 officers, 22. I think we have about 22 cars too. We can't afford to run those. I mean, the budget on that is phenomenal. I can't give you the exact figure, but it's part of that admin cost. And we just can't keep ticking along like this. The credit cards now, we're basically, to put it blankly, we're on payday loans right now. Now, unless we look at this next year, in which I'm a very aggressive, budget-driven person, very aggressive. Unless we look at this, it's not going to improve. And I'm saying I'm willing to look at it over my 4-year term, gradually bring everything down to line as the income from our property taxes are coming down. I want to bring everything else down accordingly alongside with them. So we level out. Property prices aren't going to go back up in the next 4 years. So we have to bring everything down to balance against the general fund. So we have money to go forward. So I think if you go to the staff and say to them, we're not planning on firing you because you're skilled. We appreciate you being here. Morale will go up. They're willing to give it up. I'm not saying I've spoken to any of them, but they want their jobs. They know they can't go out into the private sector and earn that kind of money in private sector, employ. They can't do that. They've got a good thing going. They know they've got a good thing going. All I'm saying is, let's look at this. Let's be reasonable. The economy's on its knees right now. The city's on its knees. Let's bring down those overhead costs. And the biggest one we have are those staff salaries. Keep them employed, reduce it down, reduce it over 4 years, so that they can absorb the, bring down the costs, they can absorb those into. That's the way to keep them around, right?
Okay.
I think it's more of a historic problem than an accounting problem. I'm best known, perhaps, for having founded an organization called Citizens for More Important Things. And it was a kind of simple acronym, but it can be more broadly applied. It was simply applied to the building of private sports stadiums with public dollars. You may recall the fights in Seattle, King County, over at Westfield, Kingdom. So we came up with the acronym. I think it applies more broadly in the sense that the Bainbridge Island City Council, Bremerton City Council, state legislature is a policy-making body. It is not an administrative body, policy-making body. And the more important thing, the most important thing to do is set priorities, set what's important for you as a city. City council is not a driver of budgets. It's a matcher of budget or a tailor of budgets to policy. Once you set the policy, set your agenda, you tailor the budget to it. What happened before the change of government was the mayor was caught in a pitched battle with city council members over policy, and the staff was right in the middle and caught fighting, being fought over and fought with the changeover from the mayor, strong mayor to administrator. Mayor as administrator form of government to the current council, it's my sense that more than a few city employees are left out there not executing policy or executing a budget, but making policy. At least that's the public perception. So the public, we got a lot of great public on Bainbridge Island. We got great citizens, well informed, they vote 80, 90%. And we speak out when policies don't go our way. So sometimes it's the firing at the messenger. Staff person's on the front line, they're attacked by the public, and as a way of getting at policy when the council hasn't set policy and done so, and then affirmed that policy whether you're on the losing or winning side going forward. And so my sense is that we have wonderful people on the staff, City of Bainbridge Island. Some of them get tagged with setting policy, and Lord knows I've done it myself. And I think that it's more a matter of Bainbridge City Council determining what we want to be and what we can be. Well, if we're a water utility, okay, we're a water utility, but we can't leave the sewer behind and figure, gee, nobody's going to pay a sewer rate. It's more than an accounting problem. It's how does controlling the water utility dovetail with growth policies, with all the other things that happen as a city. Sewer policy is a growth policy. How we set our roads, what we do with our roads is a growth policy. All of that is within the purview of the board of directors. City of Bainbridge Island, City Council of Bainbridge Island, the board of directors of a major corporation, and set that policy for where you go. I think that tailoring the budget to the volatility of sales tax revenue is critical. It's a matter of setting priorities. We can't have on Bainbridge Island, we're somewhat notorious for restricting the development of big box stores. Well, okay, that may be great, and that's what we want. But it means as a city, we're not going to be the city of Tukwila with all those big stores and very few residents to serve, okay? We have to set priorities, but it's at a policy level that the priorities get set.
let me use that for the next question, because I mean, you can tie a lot of these things up that you guys have already mentioned, and you have people on your island, your constituents who are going to be very vocal, are going to say what they feel. This is why you have that example of big box stores. Tell me what you think you would do individually to hear them, to get that. How are you going to be in touch with what the people really want that policy, the direction you're going to take from them? How are you going to listen? How are you? What are your ideas on reaching out to them to guide some of those decisions that will be made in the coming year? We'll start with David this time.
Well, I'm a firm believer in citizen involvement in setting the policy, determining policy and setting the policy of the city. You know, as I mentioned on our horror story with our neighborhood, kind of being shut out of the process of discussing this development and having to turn it into a battle. You know, my neighbor said if Bainbridge Island was a country, we'd be at war all the time. And I don't like that. You know, conflict is stressful and it's not particularly productive. Involving people in the process, listening to them. I've never learned anything with my mouth open. But just doing a lot of effective listening in terms of what people want, and doing that in such a way that you can actually build a defendable policy for the city on things like, you know, do we want to aggressively pursue retail development so we can get the sales tax revenue up, or do we want to remain largely a residential community? That's a conscious decision that communities make. If you make the decision to remain largely residential, then you live within your means in terms of what the property tax revenue is and your smaller sales tax revenue. Those are the two main revenue sources in the general fund. It's, you know, it's critically important that a city council go through that process and do a lot of listening to the whole range of opinions on that before they move forward with setting policy.
John, how do you ensure the public voice is heard?
Well, I listen to the public all the time. I mean, I'm also in and out of the city hall all the time. But on the island, the minority are the very vocal ones. And they're very smart. And we have a very, very highly educated residency there. The issues, the contentious issues at City Hall have been around. I came in '93. I've been around since '93. You know, '94 I walked in there to start permitting, and there was content. I felt uneasy. There was the feeling of it's us against them. It's been like that for years and years and years. So anything that comes across is heavily debated. Anything the council want to talk about is heavily debated. Public notices go out. The trouble is with the island is public notices go out, say on real estate development, because I know that, but it isn't until the 11th hour that the public start and stand up and say, we object, we want more transparency, we want to have a conversation because you're clear cutting those 5 acres. But the public notices go out well in advance and just nobody reads them. It's not until they clear cut the 5 acres that everybody gets hysterical running around saying public process wasn't followed. But it was followed. And there was a public involvement. It's just that this group weren't there. But they're very vocal. So what you have to do is you have to listen to everybody. You have to listen to the ones that are very vocal. You have to listen to the neighbors, like Dave's saying. I listen to the neighbors. Because I'm in and out of City Hall, I listen to staff a lot. I hear complaints from staff, you know, against the community. And I hear complaints from the community against the staff. So in between all that, there's a fine line. It's a delicate fine line to walk, you know. But the problem is in Bainbridge Island is City Hall needs to be disciplined. Council needs to be disciplined because we are a revenue-based budget operation. So we can't keep going out and doing things if we don't have the revenue coming in. And we certainly can't go out borrowing all the time because we're up and past our debt. You know, we've got terrible credit, by the way. All these things are part of control, discipline within the community. It's a case of, if everybody's screaming, I want this, you have to look at it and say, well, listen, we can't afford that. We can afford this, but we can't afford that. You know, you've got to look at it like that. But other than that, as far as where I get my opinion from, I've been an entrepreneur for about 37 years. So I have to look at every dollar and think, how am I going to get a paycheck? I've been paying myself 37 years. So I have to look at that paycheck and say, where's it coming from? So I have to understand the value of that dollar, you know, and that's what City Hall needs to get a grip of. They need to get a grip of what it's worth out there, how much the community want, and how we're going to do it, but we can't do everything. Do you understand what I'm saying here? It's really important to budget. And Bainbridge isn't the only community going through these pains right now. Just about every municipality in the country is going through some sort of adjustment. And it's hard. It's really hard for people to do it. They don't want to. They don't want to change.
That's why I'm asking how you communicate with those folks.
You have to communicate. You have to communicate, and you have to talk to them. You know, I think I'm really a diplomatic person. I know some people say I come on strong sometimes, but I'm passionate. But I'm really a good diplomatic person. I'm a salesman, basically. So you have to sit down with people, the power brokers, they're the council and staff at this moment, city manager, and talk it out. You have to work it out.
Chris?
The reason I'm running is to be in that position. For so many years where you're bringing people together to reach a conclusion that is agreed upon. I've worked on artificial turf, and we went out and gathered 1,200 signatures on an initiative in Bainbridge, Island, only to figure out we about had 1,100 signatures. We didn't have the legal authority to do that. But it was a means for involvement, a means for people to say, well, this is what we opposed in that instance. I worked with the Grange on I did the media for nonpartisan primary voting. Worked with the state Grange. We did the state media campaign and got nonpartisan voting. And the Grange's reason for that was they felt that the partisan system was excluding people from the primary process. It was to bring people in, bring them together. I think on the island you anticipate solutions, but you engage early, you engage often, and you're willing to compromise. In getting my legislation through Olympia, it's you know, like a willow tree. How are you strong without you losing the fiber of yourself, and yet bend with the wind to get something done? Politics is compromise. At the end, though, what I'm proposed is for Bainbridge to make sure us elected officials, if I should be so lucky to be elected, that we've got a check and balance from the citizens. I would put in place the power for Bainbridge Island was called class 35A, I believe it is, in the code. We have to adopt a referendum and initiative system. So by referendum, if we get it wrong with the voters, they can come back and unwind it, or if the elected officials are simply not listening to voters, they can, as is done statewide or Seattle, King County, bring something to the ballot. I think that keeps elected officials honest, whether you like it or not. Lots of folks complain about Tim Iman. Lots of folks complain about SEIU 1775 at the other end of the spectrum, what they bring to the ballot. What I think it does more than any other thing is it's a checkpoint that keeps elected officials listening.
I think this is a really good example of where my current experience and past experience allowed me to have access to what a lot of other local governments throughout this state as well as the country are doing in this regard. I think on a more global scale in terms of what's going on the island, there's some incredibly informed and motivated citizens groups, for example, in the arts community, in some of our farmers, in the business community, in the sustainable business in particular, and local businesses. We've got there's considerations for our elderly population, for some of our younger generation, especially some of those who are young professionals. And you know, there's a lot of different ways to reach out to those people. I think the city itself, the council, can assist that process by having different citizen groups where it sets up a feeder where it sets up certain citizen groups where it gets different recommendations or input from those specific groups based on different issues. I think what the council has done, as opposed to what it did in the past, it's decided to go to a more ad hoc system of committees and also citizen committees based on issues that come up. I think that's a good idea. It's much more flexible than having standing committees, although maybe a few standing committees would be appropriate. So you have a direction toward getting specific input from certain groups, and especially those that are more motivated than others, because it's a two-way street. I mean, for the people that don't want to get involved, you can reach out to them, and we should be reaching out to them, but there's some groups that are very involved and are very motivated, and they have a lot to say, and they're great resources, and they should be used as resources. Another big thing that I've seen what other cities and other local governments are doing are using social media. They're using Facebook, using Twitter. Twitter, some people may scoff at that. Well, I can tell you that a lot of cities are using that for emergency preparedness and emergency services, where cities can get information out to people in real time about, for example, landslides or whatever it may be, and it can be an incredible tool. It also provides a way for especially very busy professionals, and there's a lot of those on our island, who may not have time to go to meetings at night, but they want to be involved. It allows them a venue, a forum, a way to get their input as part of the process, and I think that's very important. I think the city should look into doing that more. I know that some cities are doing that on a more active basis, and it can be very effective, and I'd like to be a part of that. You know, we're going into the future. There's a whole different sense about how especially younger people participate in this democracy. I think we should be cognizant of that, and I think we should help facilitate it, and I want to be a part of that.
We're getting close to the end, so I thought I'd ask one more question. It kind of touches on what John mentioned a moment ago, that getting used to a new, how government works these days, and it's not unique to Bainbridge Island at all. It's national, federal government, state government in different cities. That there's kind of getting used to what government is able to do with the constraints of the budgets that they have now. And so I'd like to hear what your priority is. What should the city council be directing that city government to do for the residents of Bainbridge Island? What do they need you doing most importantly these days as you look forward to the next 4 years? What would your kind of top of the line item be that you're still able to provide for the people, and what's at the top of that list to you? And I think, since we started with you, we'll start here and finish.
You know, in my experience, and I include myself in that, most of the people who live on Bainbridge Island live there because they want to. There's other places around that they could easily move to, and in fact, it's probably easier if you're going to work in Seattle to live closer than there rather than rush down to the ferry every morning. But there's a unique quality of life on Bainbridge Island that people appreciate and they cherish it. And I think that's one of the primary responsibilities of the city, is to understand people's motivation for living there and nurture the things that are important to them. Healthy Puget Sound, roads that you can actually drive on safely, efficiently delivered utilities, and then beyond the basics of roads and utilities, what other things can the city afford within that limited budget, the general fund budget from sales tax and property tax revenues, can you afford to fund? The city right now had to cut out funding to both the arts and the helpline, kind of both ends of the spectrum, because they were broke. I'd like to see that budget pared down to the point where it's sustainable, and then you have the option of looking at not only the basic services, but what are some of the other things that we want to fund as a community? What's important to us? Do we want to have public art? Do we want to make sure that our organization that takes care of the people that are on hard times at that moment isn't scrambling to be able to provide services to those folks? And
which of those is important to you? I guess that's what.
Well, both. I'm a fan of the arts, and I'm a fan of Helpline. I think that's a good balance. It's a good illustration of the balance that a community needs to achieve.
Joe.
Well, I think this is another example where we don't need to reinvent the wheel. I think that the big thing is having strategic planning. So there's different. It's very obvious in land use situations where actually the state law requires that we do strategic planning, and we have a capital improvement plan and otherwise. So what you do is you set near-term goals, you set long-term goals, and that's what the council's job is to do. I know that the council or the administration in recent years, they've changed the process and now they're much more focused on that type of approach. And I think they've got some expertise in that kind of approach, and I think that's the right way to go. So what the city manager should be doing is coming to the council and saying, okay, let's set the priorities for this year and for the next 5 years, and let's figure out what your priorities are, and then let's figure out how we're going to fund those priorities. And you can only fund with the money that you have. So if you don't have the money to do those priorities, and some things drop off the list, and maybe you put them down the road a few years, just like any kind of capital improvement plan where you've got 10 different projects you want to get done, but you only have a certain amount of money. So some things get pushed down the road. But that's the council's role, is to set those priorities. And then once those priorities are set, you have to be somewhat flexible. If things come up, emergencies happen, you have a rainstorm and a road washes out, you got to figure out how to deal with that, and you leave contingencies. But you got to stick to those goals and those priorities as much as possible, and so that everyone's on the same page and people feel good about where things are going. So when people come to a council meeting and say, you know, I need funding for this, this, or this, you know, it's the council can't be reacting every meeting to a change in priorities. It has to be able to fit into the priorities that the council's already set. And again, they need to be flexible, but that strategic planning process, I think, is very important for the council as well as for the community as a whole.
I think job one is public safety, cops, courts. I want to be able to, I should say this on camera, but I lost the key to my house 18 years ago. I have to replace it. I want Bainbridge Island to be a place where we've got good and responsive police, they're well trained, and they are community involved in the sense that they're not just shooting the bank robber, they're engaged with the community and working toward a safe, healthy, vibrant community. Roads, good roads. I don't think roads, I think it's absolutely wrong to use roads as a zoning tool or a density tool or land planning tool. We need safe roads on Bainbridge Island. We have a road between the ferry and Paulsbo that is now chock full of cars non-stop and is a death trap. We have other roads that you cannot walk on. You cannot walk beside that road without taking your life in your hands. I live in urban Bainbridge Island, in Winslow, if there is such a thing. Our kids cannot ride their bicycles on some of those roads. I just won't let it happen. That's not right. That's not a community. That's not a good community. We need sidewalks or bike paths. We need some of these things. I'll lay this out. You need money to do it, but other things you can do without cash, without money, just with better policies. The domestic health. Help for people who can't help themselves, or capable of helping themselves, one reason or another, without any judgment whatsoever. There was a time I was chairman, president of a corporation. We were one of the largest .coms in the world. We were 10 years ago the precursor to the Kindle ebook. We were 10 years too early. We got it totally wrong. I went to Helpline. My God, they fed my kids. If I am on the council, there will always be that safety net for people. So people can take risks in their business. So people can get laid off and not have to worry about feeding their kids. You know, it was absolutely a lesson in humility for me. Absolutely. But I won't say that I treasure it. I'll just say I learned from it. To the extent that the city, that are absolutely necessary social services that the city's engaged in, domestic violence, that sort of thing, that reaching out and dealing with those issues is part of what makes us a community. I think it's incumbent on any elected official to say, yeah, I'll take a really hard vote. It won't be the vote to cut a domestic violence program. It'll be a vote to raise taxes. Okay, say, this is what it takes to be a good community, to budget properly, to rise to the occasion and say we are better than, we are good people. We take care of one another, we take care of our communities. The next on my short list would be environmental stewardship. And by that I mean whether it's defining riparian areas on the shoreline, getting those policies straight, zoning, that sort of thing, having the resources, committing to having the resources to get it done right, so we protect the long-term health and vibrancy of the community. And on my list of 5, I guess, jobs, business, economic development, what can we do as an island that does make it possible for, whether it's retail or whether it's the world's best fly fishing rods are made on Bainbridge Island. Some of the most incredible genetic pioneering is taking place on some privately held companies ultimately commercializing that genetic mapping. That's taking place on Bainbridge Island. What can we do as a city that brings those jobs to our island? Because it's a great place to live, because we take care of one another, because we've got a tax structure that's efficient.
Good job.
I want you to ask the question again because I lost
Oh.
track. I lost track of it. I know what you're going to say, but I just need you to phrase it for me so I can actually come back and give you a straight answer.
At the very briefs, what should the city government be doing for the people, and what did you put at the top of that priority?
I put the comprehensive plan up there. I think we should be watching the comprehensive plan regardless of what comes through the door. And that spells out where we're going. That's a plan that we've adopted, we can follow it, and there should be no deviation from that. And basically, I agree with everybody else. I think there's some wonderful things, the helpline house, the utilities, all those things are part of the comprehensive plan, and that's our responsibility to deal with that. And in order to deal with that comprehensive plan, I have to go back to budgeting, because that's where we're falling apart. So it's the comprehensive plan for me. That's it.